Hi, I'm Scott.
And now,
We're Gunpowder, Fiction and Plot, and today we get a book discussion on My Dark Vanessa by, who's it by now?
Kate Elizabeth Russell.
And this is her debut novel, isn't it?
I believe so.
All right, so let's have a brief overview of this. So we will discuss what happened in this book, so there will be spoilers, but before we do it, we'll start off with a bit of a review so that we can be spoiler-free, so that you can decide whether this is a book for you if you've not read it yet.
So let's start with the trigger warnings.
Rape.
Pedophilia.
Grooming. Sexual abuse.
Dudes being shit.
Bitchiness. Fighting. All sorts of... If you got anything wrong with if you're a woman living in today's society, trigger warning.
Consider having a good day before you read this.
Yeah. So this details Vanessa, who is a 15-year-old girl.
And a 34-year-old woman. So we've got dual timelines going on.
And her relationship with Strain, or Mr. Strain, Jacob Strain, but he's referred to as Strain throughout the whole book, who is a teacher who is the perfect 3 times her age.
Yeah.
So this is, as Nell said, dual timelines where Vanessa is looking back and then it flips back to what actually happens, and then it looks at Vanessa in the modern day as she comes to terms as women are starting to come forward saying that Strain was inappropriate with them, and it's sort of kept nice and vague.
Yes.
So, before we get into spoiler territory, is there anything that you want to say about this book?
I think it was beautifully written, very nuanced, a very delicate handling of a subject matter that is often brutalized and romanticized and made quite exploitative. This was a very complex look at a very complex issue, and no one tried to make it simple, and I think that it is a very good read.
It's simultaneously the easiest book you will read and the hardest book you will read. The English
is definitely easy to consume. It's a consumable
book. You could give this to a teenager, but don't. Unless the teenager is, emotionally
mature. On an emotional level, I certainly found that this took a toll on me. I found it very, very difficult to read at times. And then at other times, I just wanted to race to the end so that it was over. But by the same token, everything in it was valuable. So while it was difficult and confronting, it was definitely a worthwhile expenditure of energy.
Now, I will also say we did buddy read this with Ange with an E, and she sort of said very similar things to that. It was just so much for her, and that she and I think we all found that the buddy reading process was really good because
there's a bit more support for starters, I think. Also, I think she got a lot out of hearing your perspective as a manly man.
Yes. And I think the thing about this book is this is actually a super good book club book because it really stimulates conversation. We
might try and cut in some of our conversation from that.
Yeah, we had a chat with Ange on Zoom. Yeah. So overall, I thought this was spectacular and a book that everybody should go out and buy and read, unless you think you will be triggered by it, obviously.
I think even for those who think, you, so even if this might be triggering, but you think you might be able to do enough self-care so that it's not damaging to you, then it might be a cathartic read for some people, even if this is issues that you have dealt with in your own life.
Sorry, I was just saving the massage ball from the dog who thinks it's his toy.
He's so sad.
Yeah.
He's like, that's mine.
The thing is, it's actually in with a pile of his toys, but he wants the thing that isn't his. Anyway, what I thought was really good about it is when I actually think of books similar to this book, I think of things like Lolita or Tess of the D'Urbervilles, or books questioning the role of women in society and rape and that sort of stuff. And most of them, like certainly those two, are written by men.
Yeah.
And this isn't. And it's such a weird thing because men should be writing about that, but so should women. And why are we only... Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's not the men that's writing about it. It's the problem is that society will only value them, or is there something about the privilege that men have that allow them to write about it with ease? Or
I definitely think that it is much less emotionally taxing for a man to write about this topic matter than a woman who has likely experienced something on the spectrum of what occurs in this book. So yes, there's some privilege about that, but also I think I think it would be a really interesting dissertation research project to sit down and compare this to Lolita, which is referenced several times in the book.
I feel like the comparison with Lolita is like the elephant in the room, and then they just...
Yeah, but I feel like comparing the gendered bias in each book would make an incredible research topic for someone who wants to do that work. I'd be really interested to read it. So can you do it?
Yeah. If you're starting your master's next year, that would be ideal.
That would be handy.
Timing. Anybody
just drop a link to your first draft
of that age.
I'll totally help you proof it.
Yeah. So I'd like to get into spoilers, but so before that, I gave it 5 stars. I know you don't do stars, but
I don't do stars, but I do think that this is. I would recommend anyone who is in a mental health position to read this book should read this book.
Yeah. So let's start to discuss some of the spoilers, shall we?
The
Spoiler.
spoilery content.
So the first thing I found really interesting is going into this book, I thought that this would be only talking about one relationship, that between Vanessa and Strain. And what I found really interesting is that the whole time you've got Vanessa's friends, you've got all sorts of other relationships, you've got Vanessa's other relationships, and they're all fucked up.
Yeah, because he isolates her in the way that people who groom children to sexually abuse them do. Like, they cut them off from all their support systems, and they choose children to groom who are already a little bit isolated. And you can see that in this. You know, she was already having a blue with her best girlfriend, and she was all by herself and in a boarding school away from her parents and her support system, and he cut her off by making her just a bit more special, and they will never understand you, and I understand you, and all that sort of bullshit.
Yeah, I actually thought that it was quite interesting to see the grooming process, and this is something that we discussed with Ange on Voxer, how I thought that Strain was sort of like casting a wide net and then narrowing it and narrowing it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't even necessarily think he was narrowing it. I suspect he was netting all the time and fishing all the time. I know that Vanessa was made to feel like she was special and she was the only one, but certainly by the end of the book we know that he's not only pursuing one girl.
Yeah, and that was something that I was trying to figure out in the whole book. It was Taylor, wasn't it? The other girl.
The girl who came forward.
There was lots of girls, clearly, but Taylor was the other major girl. She was sort of representative of all the others.
Yeah.
And it was the crossover in time between the relationship that Vanessa and Strain had and how long that went for.
Yeah, the fact that he was controlling her into her 30s.
But even their sexual relationship went for quite a long time. And that was that I found that quite interesting because there's something about women who are 15 versus women who are 18. There is that line.
Children who are 15.
Well, yeah, children who are 15.
Yeah.
But there's that line that you go from a child to an adult at 18, and it's clearly not
actually at 25
the case. And Strain was enjoying. Oh, that's a horrible thing to say, but Strain and Vanessa were still having quite a functional relationship while Vanessa was at college. Did I say functional relationship?
Yeah, that's weird.
Their relationship wasn't... They were both committed to their relationship while Vanessa was at college.
But were they? I mean, that's certainly not the impression that I got. I definitely felt like Vanessa was endlessly trying to make him prove that he really loved her so that she could justify having tolerated the abuse to herself. And that it would all be okay, that it all started when she was a child if he loved her forever.
Yes.
And the instant that didn't happen, then her justification system crumbled and she started to lose her shit.
It was like, what can I forgive if it was true love?
Yeah, which is very strange.
But I feel like that is not necessarily a reflection of a relationship between a child and an adult. It is the reflection of a relationship between a man and a woman.
I think that women are taught to use love to justify abuse. I think our society teaches women from a very young age to tolerate bad behaviour from men because men love us, and all you have to do is look at rom-coms about creepy stalker men and it's supposed to be romantic, and we're conditioned into this weird tolerance of unacceptable behaviour as long as they love you, yeah. And I think that this was an excellent demonstration of that horror show.
Yeah. Well, I think that we saw, Vanessa's friend really liked the guy and was going to give him a blowjob, even though she didn't like blowjobs. And Vanessa picked up that other guy at the pub who was really creepy and spoke to her online, and none of these were actually things that would have been illegal, but they were all instances of abuse and horribleness going on inside of what legally we consider a healthy, normal relationship.
Yes.
You can't see that Brinny is trying to climb up behind me.
Kind of see his head appearing behind me, but not very much.
Come here, mate. You can sit on my knee. No, fine. That's consent. He doesn't want to do it.
Oh, rapey dog.
Oh, you do? There you go, mate.
Put in. What I thought was really interesting, and I'm reminded by the big blue font on the back of the book. It says, "All he did was fall in love with me, and the world turned him into a monster." So, big spoiler. After a certain amount of being sort of publicly scrutinised in the media and having women come forward about him crossing the line with them when they were children, Strain kills himself. And I think that is a really stark representation of what we do to particularly pedophiles, is we turn them into this mythological monster that is irredeemable and nasty. And unfortunately, they're actually super prevalent and freaking everywhere. And they can't come forward and ask for psychological help because we vilify them so harshly. So they can never get help to not offend and to not act on it. And when they do act on it,
I always remember
children are broken.
A case of a man who he was a pedophile and he went to jail, He was complaining about headaches, and they did a brain scan and they found a tumor in his brain and they removed it, and he stopped being attracted to children. And then later on, he asked them to scan his brain again, and they're like, "Why do you want a brain scan again?" He's like, "I'm starting to be attracted to children again." And they did a brain scan, and the tumor in his brain had regrown, and they had to cut it out.
But there's
again
very little studies done about pedophilia and how you can reform that kind of person into,
Yeah, it's so taboo that we don't try and fix it.
We don't try and fix it, and yet so many of our children are damaged by people who, let's be fair, are struggling with being attracted to the wrong kind of people, whether because often it seems that it's stemming from an abusive childhood, but sometimes not, and we don't know why. And it's not something that we do anywhere near enough to bring to the surface and talk about it and fix.
The attraction is not the bad part. The action is the bad part. Acting on it is the bad part. But they're made to feel like the world's worst person if they're attracted to children, and they're not allowed to
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and I mean it's not the same thing, and I feel like this sentence could totally be misconstrued, and I don't want it to be.
Yeah. We're not trying to be empathetic to people who do the crime.
But why are we not trying to be empathetic to people who do the crime?
Oh, well, okay, but we're not trying to forgive them for it. We're trying to understand them so that we can prevent that from happening again.
Exactly. I definitely think it's either we need to decide if it's a pathology or not. Is it something that we can treat as a medical illness? Is it something that is irredeemable and they just need to be put in a island away from children for the rest of their lives? Chemically castrated. What the damage that is done to children who are sexually abused is lifelong and often life devastating. And it undoes the potential of so many human beings, particularly young women, that could otherwise be contributing to our society and making the world a fucking awesome place. And that is robbed from our world by something we're not even talking about. And
let's bring it back to the book. How much of it is about them, and how much of it is about society? And the examples that were used in My Dark Vanessa, the infatuation and infantilization of Britney Spears and Fiona Apple when they were minors.
So many creepy references to our own pop culture and how it just makes it so acceptable. I was 16 when Britney Spears was 16 and looking like a whore, you know what I mean? And completely sexualized. And we all thought that was totally normal. And looking back at how many of us were dating mid-20s men in our childhood,
I actually think that this book is totally aimed at somebody in their 30s, so because of all those pop culture references. Because if you are a younger viewer, if you are in your earlier 20s, you probably don't remember these things happening.
But what was that song when she was in the school uniform? She's like,
"Hit me, baby, one more time."
Hit me, baby, one more time.
The first one.
My God.
Yeah.
Look at it as an adult. Go back and watch that and go, why is there a child being pornographic on my television? It's weird. And as a society, we totally accept it.
And the other thing that's weird about that song is it didn't translate that well. That hit me, that's meant to be send me a text, talk to me, blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't translate into other languages. That really just sounds like abuse to me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but anyway.
Yeah, punch me in the face one more time.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. The only way I know that you love me is your abuse, so do it again. That's what it sounds like to me.
I just think it's just yet another example of young girls being told that their job is to be sexual for men. And at 16, it's easy, to be a sexual object for men. That is a really easy thing to do at 16 because men are being told that's what they should be looking for too, you know?
Yeah, society is fucking people up in different ways, and it's making it worse.
Horrifying.
Yeah. So there's so much in this book. It doesn't leave any stone unturned.
There's an examination of things like sexual abuse victims who enjoy sexual pleasure and the kind of guilt that comes along with that. What level of sexual touching is required for it to be considered sexual abuse? Like, all of these nuanced questions come up in this book, and I think it is an exceptional examination of all those things that often we're not spoken about properly and in a nuanced way get thrown up as like straw men in consent discussions. You know what I mean? Like when you're arguing on the internet with misogynists, let's be fair.
Yeah. And it's those specific things are very hard to argue with because you're talking about specific one-off examples and all of this, and it's nuanced and it's different for every woman and instance and situation, and not even necessarily women. Yeah. But it was nice to have just an example, and that's often what's really good about these books. So one of the things that I think comes up in the book that it doesn't get discussed a lot is Vanessa is bright. She is smart cookie, right? And she's an English nerd, and Strain is an English teacher, and she reads books, and Strain actually helps her with learning stuff, by the same time abuses her. And she goes up to university, and she's a super smart cook, and she's really got it all together to become some sort of writer or college professor or something. But in her 30s, she's a concierge at a hotel.
Yeah, she's a glorified receptionist.
Yeah, and her career's gone nowhere, and you sort of, as you piece together why that's happened, you realise that it's so linked in with this sexual abuse, and then with a second misogynist that comes along in her life who is significantly better than Strain, but still a problematic character. Pointing out it's not all black and white, but some of it's pretty dark grey.
Yeah.
And he actually he never crossed the line, but you knew that he would if, do you know what I mean?
Well, you knew that he probably had.
Yeah, but he never crossed the line with Vanessa. He never did anything, but you knew that if she said, let's do it, that he would. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, he was trying to keep himself from being culpable, not trying to keep himself...
You're trying to have Vanessa be the beginner.
The bad guy.
Yeah. But yeah, I think just there's so much in this. It's so much. This is not the simple book that, it's very easy to simplify this book into it's a schoolgirl and a teacher and the relationship they have and her realizing that that's not so good. This is really good literature. This is a book that will be around for years and years to come.
I mean, it might not be. I imagine it'll make a whole lot of people very uncomfortable.
Books that make people uncomfortable do last.
It is definitely a good book, and it should be around for a long time. I think it's a very difficult discussion to have, and it's just so worth it.
It is. And yeah, as I said, I really do recommend this for book clubs. I recommend this for anybody out there that wants to do buddy reading. If you're looking for a book to buddy read with somebody, this is a book that you will want to talk about when you finish it.
Yeah, for sure. And while you're reading it.
It's just, and I read an interview with, I can't remember her name. I'm sorry, Kate Elizabeth.
Russell.
Kate Elizabeth Russell, and her main goal for this was as a conversation starter.
Well,
and
winner, chicken dinner.
She's done that very well. The other thing I find really cool about the interview with her is that she started writing this when she was 16 or 17, and it took her 15 years to write this, and the age gap between the two Vanessas
is about her age gap.
I mean, we said 15 and 34, but actually Vanessa is, I think she's even 14 at the start of the book.
Yeah, and she's very, very young.
And the early timeline goes up to 22-ish. And then there's the other timeline, which starts at about 30 and goes to about 35.
Yeah.
It's not a simple process. Yeah. What did you make of the character Taylor in this book?
I mean, what do you mean?
I mean, I thought that Vanessa was representative of a woman who didn't have anything together after sexual abuse, and Taylor had it all together after sexual abuse. And as these two characters got to know each other a little bit more, you start to see that Vanessa is getting her shit together a bit more, and that Taylor has a bit more of a facade of having everything together, but is a bit more broken.
I think you talked about there being different examples of different types of people. Some people, when they have, a trauma, they bury themselves in work. They bury themselves in ambition. And other people bury themselves in drugs.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it really is, like grief, trauma is something that people respond to differently. And it's not surprising that both of these girls responded to it differently. Both of them thought about it differently. Vanessa doesn't come to terms with the fact that there's a consent issue and that the relationship is abusive until, someone else is claiming that Strain abused them. And then it's more about the fact that he cheated on her that brings the realization crashing down, rather than...
Vanessa's in hardcore denial.
She is in so much denial. She does not... It is a relationship in her mind. It is her first real love in her mind. It is not... It's not her childhood trauma. And if you like, she's... No wonder she's not functioning. She's got to spend so much of her energy recreating her universe around this denial system she's got going on, whereas Taylor at least acknowledges that there was a thing that happened. Additionally, Taylor in Strain is no longer in Taylor's life, and he's still interfering with Vanessa. He's still which was, I found, the most shocking thing. She hears about him. She hears about this Taylor woman coming forward, and the first thing she does is contact him, and she's still in touch with him, and I was blown away.
Yeah, like, this man is still controlling her life and telling her what to say.
He's still in touch with her to make sure she doesn't dob him in,
and like that opening thing, like, Strain will be in a retirement village, unable to wipe his own ass or feed himself, and I will be that person that is...
Yeah, I'll go and take care of him because we're meant to be together, sort of scenario.
Yeah, that was quite vomit worthy. The other thing that I found really horrifying in this is the school. And the amount of things that the school did wrong. Yeah, just to perpetuate the existing power structure and not at all acknowledge what was happening to these poor girls. It was gross. And so at some point it comes out that Vanessa and Strain are having a relationship, and Vanessa basically says that it's happening to somebody, and then it gets reported to a teacher, and Vanessa doesn't want that to be reported to a teacher, but it slips out because, I don't know, loose lips sink ships or whatever. But anyway, they have to have a meeting with the headmaster, and who goes and gets Vanessa to tell her that they are having a meeting with the headmaster? And takes her out of class. But it's Strain himself. And so he gets that last 5 minutes to get their story straight. And the thing that is so bad about this is we know that the author has done some proper research on things that have happened. And this is not her telling a story that is unrealistic. This is her telling stories based on stuff that's happened.
I think as a woman, I don't know if men hear these stories, but I think as a woman, we all talk about, the traumas of our childhood and all that sort of stuff, and we all get together and you gather sort of a collection of what is realistic and what is not, even if just among people you've been friends with over the years and that sort of thing. And you talk about the victims being in denial. The people who surround the perpetrators of these sort of crimes have such an incredible system of denial. No one wants to believe that their husband, their friend, their neighbour, their colleague is a dirty pedo, because in everyone's mind that makes them a monster. And
yeah, that's true. If you told me my best friend was a pedo, I would be like, no.
If you look up the advice for people who want to protect their children from pedophiles, the only way to protect your child from pedophilia is to ensure that your child is never alone with an adult. That there is always two adults at every time. And yes, that includes your husband/wife. Because these people are someone's husband and wife. So the fact that there are systems of denial and systems that protect these perpetrators, like, no shit.
It's hard. If we had a kid and the kid came to me and said, "Mummy touched me inappropriately" or something, I'd be like, "Are you sure? Did you misunderstand what happened?" Like, that would be my response. And because I know you and I know you wouldn't do it, right? But then again, if you were a monster, you wouldn't come out and say, "Hey, I actually fancy kids." I'm just like,
well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it wouldn't happen. So, and as adults, we really need to take the words of kids seriously and not dismiss what they say. And I know that
and not just like 5-year-olds, also 16-year-old girls who are going through rebellious phases.
Yeah, totally. The last thing I want to talk about is one of the most difficult characters in the book, and that's Vanessa's mum.
Her poor mum.
Her poor mum, who can see what's happening and has the intuition to know what's happening and is trying to help Vanessa, but is every step of the way Vanessa is angry at her mum as well, and she doesn't know what to do, and in the end she does nothing, and I
don't think she does nothing. I think ultimately she pulls her out of that campus and makes sure that she is safe to a certain extent, as much as she can. I think that there's a little bit of unconscious bias in this book, in the sense that the mum cops all this blame for the poor parenting after the fact. It's really clear that both parents know that abuse has happened. It is really clear that they should do something about it and don't, because they don't know what to do. They don't send her to therapy. They just don't.
And I suppose one of the things that there isn't a support network for this. There isn't like a manual, like, so your kid's being sexually assaulted. Yeah. Here's what you should do.
So your kid's being sexually assaulted and the school that it happened at is denying that it happened. Like, you've got no support from the school. You've got no support from anyone who you would normally get support from. And you don't know what to do. And the blame is lumped squarely on the mum, and daddy gets to be off scot-free, which kind of irked me a bit.
But you said it's clear that the dad knows about it. Now, I didn't get that. Why do you think it's clear that the dad knows about it?
I can't remember.
You can't remember. Okay. But
there is definitely a very clear moment between mother and daughter that she doesn't have with her dad.
Yeah.
And it's clear that Vanessa knows that her mum knows about it.
Well, that's the thing. Like, we are... The thing about this book is it's so easy to forget that Vanessa is our narrator and Vanessa is unreliable. And, like, intellectually, she's unreliable, but when you're reading the book, it's easy to forget that unless you check this.
Yeah, a lot of the time, because she's justifying all the time, and it's very easy to buy into her justification.
Yeah, but you do know, like, she knows that her mum knows because of the photo that she finds. And we don't have that moment with the dad, but I mean, the dad might know.
There's a moment with the dad, I just can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But very much mum gets blamed for there not being any follow-up and potentially for this toxic relationship continuing into Vanessa's adulthood. But it's weird because the mum is almost like the only one that is listening to Vanessa, but she's the only one that shouldn't listen to Vanessa because Vanessa's like, it's fine, I don't want you to do anything, leave me alone. And the mum's like, okay, I guess, but if there is something, you will tell me. You know what I mean? Yeah, and Vanessa's never ever going to come forward.
And so you're almost like angry at the mum for not doing anything, but actually she's the only adult that listens to Vanessa in this whole book. It's just that Vanessa doesn't want what's good for her and doesn't ask for what she needs, because she's self-destructive.
Also, and clearly doesn't understand what's happening.
Yes, yeah. Anyway, I think that this is an absolute fabulous book. This will make my top 10 books for the year for sure. Although I've had some really good books.
It was a rip snorter. I do think everyone should read it. Rip snorter. Everyone should read it. I don't know that I'd call it enjoyable, but it was definitely worthwhile.
It's intellectually stimulating. Have you read the books? Let us know in the comments. What did you think? Did you agree with our analysis of it?
What were your top 5 made me rich moments from My Dark Vanessa? Because I feel like that's what we could compare notes.
Yeah. All right. We hope you're reading something good. Bye.
Bye.